Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows, and welcome to Proud Mary in the heart of Rosebank, a spot that I've been coming to now for a couple of years that combines some really cool and fun food with a really good wine list, and most importantly, one of the finest sommeliers in the country. Someone who's very familiar to the Dan Really Likes Wine show, and somebody who's got an extraordinary approach to taking wine to a broader audience. And she's certainly doing that here at Proud Mary, because Katlego Mathobela's wine selection, which you can see in part above the magnificent bar that sits as the centerpiece of Proud Mary, is an indication as to the variety and the quality of the wine that is here. And it's one of the really fun parts of coming to visit. It's something I do relatively often, finding not just the perfect meal, but the wine that is going to go with it. And the combinations available mean you finish off going, yeah, I've had a really good time, but I think I want to come back next week and try something again. And so on the course of today's show, I'll be chatting to Kat when I can drag her away from a very busy floor. It's only 11 o'clock in the morning here, and already Proud Mary is absolutely pumping. We're going to be chatting to her about the wine that she's selling, about her background, and about how life at Proud Mary has become a very successful part of her story in wine. That's not the only story today, though. A little later on, somebody's got a brand new adventure in play. Knysna Oyster is the man behind the Kleine Wijn, and in the past they've been dotted around the Franschhoek area, but now they're in the middle of Tulbagh in a grand old vineyard that I didn't know existed until I went to see it a few weeks ago. There's an extraordinary cellar, beautiful views, a vast farm, and a really exciting future for a brand that now also includes Faf du Plessis and Free du Plessis, the cricketer and rugby respectively. So that's coming up a little later. First of all, though, I'm in Cape Town, the Knysna Oyster Company. You can probably guess what they do, but it's more than just oysters. It's also the chance to have some really exciting sushi. So I dragged Pete Goffe-Wood along with me, and we went and sat down for a range of Grendel wines, a great selection of sushi and oysters, and as always the case with Pete Goffe-Wood, a great deal of fun. Welcome to the Knysna Oyster Company at the waterfront, which serves a number of purposes. It is part of a far bigger farming operation that sends oysters not just all over South Africa, but all over the world. It's also a de facto depot for the rest of the V&A waterfront. Desperately needing oysters at 6 o'clock on a Friday, this is the place to come. In fact, up above there's one of the largest fish tanks on the planet, which holds vast numbers of oysters for use either around or here at the actual restaurant, which is effectively your farm to fork destination point for the oysters that make their way down to Cape Town and get eaten by people like me and people like my good friend Pete Goffe-Wood. And I have to first of all just laud your sacrifice, taking time out on a Friday morning to come and devour oysters and sushi with lashings of wine.
Well, Dan, it is as usual a last minute call to do these terrible jobs that you always throw my way. So yes, having to endure the beginning of the weekend, some fantastic wine and a few oysters. Yeah, I'll do anything for a mate.
We've got a selection of Grendel, which we're going to be trying, not just with the oysters, but with the sushi as well. And it's a twofold job today. First, to just explore the delights that the Knysna Oyster Company has to offer, but also to run through how oysters, how sushi pair with wine. We've got some great oysters here. Before we dive into them, give us the golden rules for Pete Goffe-Wood in terms of how we eat oysters and how we should be approaching them.
Well, for me, obviously, freshest is best. I like them quite simple. We've got some nice relishes here, some alternatives. The classic Mijonet, which is some shallots and red wine. We've got a nice little Asian vibe, and we've got some citrus stuff. When oysters are this good, I like them just a squeeze of lemon juice and maybe a drop of Tabasco. I like to keep them. I like to taste the oyster rather than the garnish. So I like to keep them nice, because these are looking beautiful. They're lovely glistening. You can get that lovely saline smell to them. So I want to taste the oyster, not the garnish today.
You also want to taste the wine with it.
Oh yes, most definitely.
Freshness, salinity, lots of tasting notes we often think of with a Sauvignon Blanc in particular. That is one of our Grendel wines. We've got three here. We've got a Pinot Noir Bubbles, we've got a Chardonnay, the Sauvignon Blanc both 22, and then a 23 Rosé, some Pinotage Cab served 50-50. When you're looking at wine to have with oysters, what's guiding you initially?
Often I'll go with the bubbles. I like the carbonated that you've got this lovely, luscious, quite creamy oyster, and so the palate cleansing of the bubbles for me works an absolute treat. Otherwise, I like something with a quite stark acidity, so Sauvignon Blanc is will often be my go-to with oysters.
All right, well, let's see how they compare. The first thing I want you to do as you try your first oyster, and we'll start with the bubbles, is the Pete Goffe-Wood guide to how to eat an oyster. How do we do this
Okay.
elegantly and simply?
I'm not sure that there's any elegant way of doing it. You really just got to get it in there. I'm going to give this a squeeze of lemon. And it literally is just, you're just trying to slip the entire thing. Oh.
Masterfully done. Let me see if I can do something reasonably similar.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna have a dot of Tabasco on mine because I'm a savage.
That's literally straight out the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, what I like about it is that salinity. You know, you've got this creaminess and this richness to the oyster, but you've got this. It smacks of the sea. It tastes. What often happens when people open oysters is they rinse them under a tap, and all of those natural oyster juices, which are quite salty and quite sharp, are lost completely. So these are spot on. These are perfect.
What about with the Pinot Noir based bubbles? It's 100% Pinot Noir. There's a little bit more density and texture to these particular bubbles. Is that working?
For me, it works an absolute treat. Again, you've got that sharpness. You've got that lovely sort of palate cleansing brush of the tongue from the bubbles that works perfectly with the oysters.
All right, on to oyster number 2 and our Sauvignon Blanc. And this is the one probably most people are gravitating towards, if not bubbles, Sauvignon Blanc and oysters. It's a natural combination.
Oh yeah. Again, then you're looking for now you're looking at the salinity of the Sauvignon Blanc itself. And you know, the Grendel, the Sauvignon Blanc comes from Durbanville, you're close to the sea, so you've got
I think this is actually darling fruit.
Oh, is this the darling? Well, again, also proximity to the ocean.
Exactly.
So you're getting that salinity out of the wine, and it works. It goes perfectly with the oysters.
What about the temperature? Because I know you and I both have a real thing about getting the temperature of wine right. What sort of temperature should we be drinking this at to get the best out of the oyster?
Look, I think people have this obsession with chilled wines, and they chill them to within an inch of their life. Ice cold wines are not great unless you're baking by the pool in the middle of summer and you just want something cold. It needs to be about, I would say, not more than 8 degrees, because if it gets too cold, all you're doing is just tasting acid and you're not getting any of the floral notes of the wine. It needs to warm up in the glass a little bit so you get the full expression of the wine.
And of course, not get too warm either. So the secret is drinking it quickly and then refilling it.
Yes, that's it.
All right.
Lots of small chilled glasses always work.
Now, I'm particularly interested in this next pairing because the real talk of the town this year in South Africa, headlined by Jancis Robinson at the recent Investec Trophy Wine Show, has been about South African Chardonnay and how so many of our top producers are getting it so right. On its own, I want to taste this wine, but with an oyster and see how it goes. What are you making of it?
For me, that works as well, but for totally different reasons. So, where you're pairing the sort of salinity and the freshness of the two, now the Chardonnay works for me because now the kind of the richness of both the Chardonnay and the creamier texture of the oyster are now working together. So again, another great combo.
And a beautiful example, as you have shown so many times when we've had meals together, of how you can take exactly the same dish, give it 2 wildly different wines, and they both bring out something really special.
I think that's the beauty of when you get into the pairing on an intense level, is that you can do exactly that. The oyster taste, for me, a good combination is when you effectively have 1 and 1 equals 3. That there's something that's there in the combination that is neither in the wine or the food. The two bring it out in each other. And it's interesting how you're getting a creaminess out of the oyster with the Chardonnay, whereas you're getting that saltiness out of the oyster with the Sauvignon Blanc.
All right, 3 down, 1 to go, and some rosé. Beautiful colour.
For me, I would say my least favorite combination. It still works quite nicely, but it doesn't bring anything to the oyster. So if this was now January and it's 35 degrees outside, then the chilled rosé and the oysters would be going down a treat, because you need that kind of fruitiness for the sun. But I think on a winter's day, I would rather the more direct approach to the combination of the whites than the rosé.
What it does do, though, is offer a reminder of where rosé has come in the last little while. Because if you and I had been having a glass of rosé 10 years ago, it would have been electric pink Barbie sulks, and both of us would have had diabetes by the time we'd finished the glass.
And a sweet wine would not work nicely with these oysters at all.
Like where I think this is going to work rather nicely is with some of the sushi that we've got coming up shortly. Before we finish off with the oysters, though, we've got some really cool additions. I want you to take one of them, pop one of our condiments onto the oyster, and then tell me with that particular one which one you think is going to work.
Okay, let's try the little Asian vibe. With the Asian type of the condiment, I quite like the Chardonnay. It picks up the chili quite nicely.
A little bit more weight to the wine.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you've got onion, even when it's marinated like this, it can be a bit too dominant for the Sauvignon Blanc. Whereas the Chardonnay really brings out the nice, the soy and the little chili that's in there, and they work perfectly with the Chardonnay.
Oh, and in summing it up, we've had a range of different wines, a couple of different approaches to the oysters. So much fun we've had with just one simple plate of food and a whole range of great wine.
Fantastic. I can't wait for a bit of sushi.
All right, well, we are now half a dozen oysters down each. We're going to go and find a hotel room together for half an hour, and when we're back, onto the sushi. Right, well, the effect of the oysters has worn off, and suddenly Pete's not looking quite so much like Vin Diesel as he was a little while ago. I didn't think I could eat much more, but now I'm suddenly starving again. There's something about the visual impact that sushi has, the colours, the look at it, that you just want to jump in, and you generally end up ordering far more than you actually need, but happily so.
Oh, without a doubt, it's one of my faves, and it's exactly that. It just looks so simple and so beautiful, and that's what I love of it, the stark colours, but the simplicity of it. And yeah, every time I order 4 or 5 things and sit there thinking, this is supposed to be sort of light and refreshing, and why do I feel so bloated every time I have sushi? It's probably because of the sheer volume of which I consume. So I'm looking forward to this.
This is probably not a comparison that the owners of the Knysna Oyster Company from their holiday homes in Monte Carlo want me to make. But the last time I had sushi, rather foolishly, was purchased very hungrily at a less than superior supermarket. I've basically gone from driving a Datsun to jumping into a Rolls Royce, I think, on this comparison.
No question about that. This is stunning. This is superior. Again, so for me, look, bubbles, I mean, there's that old saying that you can serve bubbles with anything, and there's good reason for that. Is that there are very few foods, from bread through oysters, sushi, through to red meat, even desserts. There's very few dishes that will clash with bubbles, and I think it's a good universal one, because again, it's that palate cleansing bubbles that clean your tongue and clean your palate and get you ready for the next dish. So whatever you eat, it's always going to work with bubbles. You can't go wrong. When in doubt, choose bubbles and you'll be fine.
And every one we've got here has, as a crucial component, acid. It's more prominent in some than in others, especially a Sauvignon Blanc. But when you've got a dish that is mostly made up of fatty fish, that acid plays such a wonderful role in lifting it, but also giving it a bit of balance.
Without a doubt. And I also think, in the same way that when people say cheese and wine work, okay, which cheese and which wine? You can have 5 different cheeses and you'll need 5 different wines. And I also think the same thing happens often with sushi, is that some of the fish pairs better with the Sauvignon Blanc and some better with the Chardonnay. You've got the fatty salmon that works really, really nicely with the Chardonnay, whereas the tuna and when you get things like, we've got some oyster here on top, and some of the white fish works. You need the acidity of the Sauvignon Blanc, and sometimes you need the fattiness of the Chardonnay. And again, at times it's the fish. It's the fish that you're pairing with, not the rice.
My suggestion earlier was that the rosé might sit quite nicely with some of these. What are you looking on this plate to pair up with that rosé?
I'm thinking that a little bit of the tuna is going to work well. And the tuna is a magnificent fish. There's almost like a meaty element to it. So this is what it works much better with more robust wines. And by robust, not saying that rosé is robust, but it's got a little bit of tannin from the reds, the blends that it's used. I think it's what do we say?
Pinotage and a
Cabernet.
Sauvignon.
So a little bit of that tannin works beautifully with the tuna. The tuna stands up to. I often do like a seared tuna with almost as a meat course. In fact, we had a dinner once where we did a bordelaise. We did the roasted bone marrow and a red wine jus, and we served that with a Pinot Noir. So the tuna stands up to all manner of wines. Oh, this is it's so good.
And then we've got a little dressed up oyster here. No surprises. We're at the Knysna Oyster Company. What are you nudging towards for this one?
This one's leading me back to the Chardonnay. The natural creaminess of the oyster, and with the kind of sort of dressing that's gone on, sort of adds that creaminess, and that works perfectly with the Chardonnay.
Agreed, 100%. Now, rather optimistically, we've also been bought some vegan sushi. Not a space we would normally venture into, but it does mean if you come here and you're not somebody who eats any meat, there is an option here. I think these are done with peppers. Again, really simple, beautiful colours. I'm going to try one of these. Pepper with wine, bit of rice.
I think you'll probably go with one of the reds. It kind of richness, and it's a roasted pepper, so the skin is off, so it's softer, it's richer, it's sweeter. It doesn't have that kind of bitterness that you get from pepper skin. So I would imagine that the Chardonnay or the red would work quite nicely with this.
Well, warn you, there's a little bit of heat in there, snuck away by a chef who's probably laughing at us from behind the counter at the moment. That is really good. There is one more tuna to taste.
That looks special. That looks a little bit of a tataki, a little seared with a lovely little sauce on the go. I think this is going to work perfect.
Couple of spring onions. That was actually mine, which you've stolen, but I'll forgive you. Just a little hint of sweetness to that on top of the umami.
That is gorgeous. It works an absolute treat with the peanut.
Oh, it does, doesn't it?
That's heaven.
There's sometimes, and there goes the rest of my food, there's sometimes when you have food like that, they go well together, but you can see that they are two quite distinct spaces. That just melted into each other, those flavours.
And it works equally well with the pinotage. I have no doubt, because we polished off so quickly, I have no doubt that it'll work beautifully with the Sauvignon Blanc and with the Chardonnay and also with the Rosé. But for me, the combination of the reds, there's just another element there. There's a richness, there's something that I think you won't get out of the pairing with the wines.
We've been very fortunate to try a whole range, and you can get a lot of wine by the glass here, so you can mix and match a bit. If you come down to the Knysna Oyster Company, they've got loads of the different Grendels, and they're all really well worth trying. If, though, you are sitting here, you've got a table, you're buying one bottle of wine, from what we've had, the oysters, followed by the sushi, is there one bottle you think can deliver to everything here?
I would say my favorite of the day would be the Chardonnay. That for me is kind of, there's nothing, as I said, look, universally bubbles will go with anything, but that's because sometimes it doesn't offend anyway and doesn't change the flavor profile. For me personally, the Optibat Chardonnay, that for me was a richness that worked really, really well with both the sushi and the oysters.
I am entirely in agreement, and I shall toast our shared opinion to that. Thank you, Pete.
Well, absolute pleasure, Dan.
And now we've got several kilograms of sushi to finish off.
That's right, good thing we're walking home.
So there we go. From the Knysna Oyster Company at the waterfront, drop by. The oysters are fresh and extraordinary. The sushi is fantastic, but what really completes it for me is this wonderful selection of wine that allows you to take some terrific food, as Peter's pointed out, and just amplify it and allow you to explore it in that wonderful dimension that wine always offers. Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, that was an almighty feast. Thank you to the Knysna Oyster Company team. What I really loved about that, aside from the fact that it was just so much fun to do, was comparing different types of wine with different types of food and different textures of food. The oyster and the sushi together was a fabulous combination. And that leads us rather nicely into what I promised you at the start of the show I'd be doing, and that is catching up with food, wine, and a person who brings them together rather nicely, because Katlego Mathobela is not just one of my favourite people in wine, but you're rather good at doing this sort of thing, as I've discovered over the years.
Why, thank you.
First of all, of course, when we met and you were still at Saint, you've now moved down the road to here at Proud Mary, and every time I see you, you're looking a little tired because I know how much work you put in, but you're also always still smiling because I know how much fun you have doing this.
That is very true. Nothing gets done without a bit of work, you know? And I guess that's why we're in the industry as well. We love wine and we love introducing people to it. We love talking about it and most of all, drinking.
Tell me a little bit about Proud Mary.
So Proud Mary is a modern eatery and wine bar. So basically what that means is it's a type of fusion when it comes to cuisine. So all different cuisines from all over the world in terms of inspiration from our head chef Mark. And wine-wise, the ethos is to introduce all our customers to niche boutique wines that are good value for money, but still great quality. And small batches, that stuff that just pops out once in a while and you just get a case or two to introduce the customers to, and woof, it's gone for the year. So yeah, man, it's just mainly just getting people together, good food and good wine that people don't really know about, which is the best part.
The only thing I don't like about Proud Mary is you're a very deceptive lot because you've got this wonderful menu and you know, small plates. And not only are the plates clearly not that small, but I generally only need 2 or 3 of them, but I end up ordering 6 or 7 because they look so good. And then I stumble out, barely able to move, but generally very content.
Hey, you need to line your stomach. All right, and there's no such thing as too much food.
You and my Greek mother-in-law, you're kind of in the same club. We've got some food and wine. I gave you a simple challenge. Pick a bottle of wine and a couple of dishes to play off. We've got 2 very different dishes. I'm fascinated to see how they pair with the wine that I know well. And I love the fact that you've chosen it because she is a really cool winemaker. She's in a really up-and-coming part of the wine world. And she's got a style of wine that I think we're seeing more and in better interpretations in South Africa at the moment.
That is true. So I chose Trizon Signature Reserve. It's a Sauvignon Semillon blend 2020. And this comes out of LM, so nice and cool climate. So what I chose for you, Dan, it is a white anchovy on Turkish toast. Now that comes with a bit of mustard, some dill, some fennel with an apple and pear kind of salsa vibes to it. So yum, 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 dressed with a little bit of green olive. And on the other side, I have some nam cham pork belly. So now this comes with caramelized lime and onion, and obviously have some fresh lime on the side with some roasted peanuts. So this is going to be delish.
All right, well, let's see how they go. As I try dish 1, which is the anchovy on Turkish bread, I'm really looking forward to this. Tell me about the aspect of this wine that says to you, I think it's going to go really well with the anchovy toast.
So what I love about the wine specifically, it's very aromatic, so it literally jumps out of the glass for you. And the Semillon also comes through. You get that dried herbaceousness that comes through, that slight masculinity from the Semillon as well. But you also get that bit of stone fruit behind it, some green apple, some pear, some white peach as well that, you know, showcases the Sauvignon. On the palate, it still has some bright acidity, but it has very beautiful structure and body around it. And it's very smooth, very structured, very linear. And it just screams anchovy, the saltiness, just the slight sweetness of the apple and the pear and the mustard. And well, everything goes well with bread.
And anchovy is not everybody's dish. I really enjoy them. And where I think you've got this so right, unsurprisingly, there's the more obvious, like the green apple, which plays off. But the anchovy and that saltiness of it, and also the mustard to an extent, it's lifting that fruit in the wine beautifully, just amplifying what's already such a nice wine from Trizon.
Yeah, unusual, but it works. It really does. It's a marriage. You know, it's a marriage.
A lovely dish, a lovely wine. And because there is some fish in there at a very simple level, most people, okay, fish, white wine, that's kind of what you'd expect. They might raise an eyebrow at dish number 2. Hang on, you've got a white wine, it's a Sauvignon Blanc with some Semillon. What on earth are you doing pairing it with pork belly? I think it's inspired. You tell me why.
Umami. Umami and Semillon are great friends. And that is something that we tend to overlook sometimes. You know, safest pairings always work, but Sometimes you just need an eyebrow to be lifted. So when I thought this, I thought the peanut, I thought the slightly stickiness of the caramelized onion and lime, and mainly because the lime is just has a perception of sweetness that just speaks to the Sauvignon, but at the same time you have the stickiness of the pork belly that speaks to the
Oh.
to the wine as well. And both of them completely different. I'm glad you're using the lime. Makes a very big difference. And it's just an unusual marriage. It's like a introvert and an extrovert marrying each other, but they don't like the same things.
All right, well, let's see. Pork
Right.
belly with a Sauvignon Semillon blend. Is this a moment of genius, or has she gone completely mad? Let's find out.
I know, you just. I know. Okay, I think I'm gonna join you on this one.
Oh, that's good. I'm very glad I threw that lime on. It was just that fine little touch that brought it out. As a dish, it's beautiful. I'm going to try it with the wine.
Okay.
And after, there's a lot of richness.
Am I completely
to this
mad?
dish. No, you are not. Just mad about wine. It just refreshes the whole palate afterwards. But there's a wonderful contrast. But neither dish nor wine is winning the battle. They're not overpowering each other. They're sitting very different spaces, but there's not a sense that because I've had one, I'm losing out on the other. And for me, that's always the best possible out of a pairing. Although I suspect I might need one more piece of pork belly just to be sure. Before we head out to Tulbagh, which is where we're headed next on the show, it looks like it's just a really exciting time in the life of Kat Mathobela. If I look at where your career's gone over the last few years, it's just been like this continue, which is so cool to see. Safe to say that you're still just loving being in the world of wine.
100%. Most people, unfortunately, we're losing a lot of sommeliers right now. And the question has come across, why am I not joining the cruise ship or the international market? I still feel I have a lot to offer the South African market and the industry itself and grooming upcoming young sommeliers as well. There's still so much work to be done, honestly, and I can't leave. It's just a beautiful country. We have such great wines, and there's more producers coming up every time, and it's never boring. It's just learning and learning and learning and hard work. You know, someone has to run the business, but the wine will always be the forefront. Passion.
Well, look, you're a South African wine treasure, so I'm very glad we haven't lost you. You talk of a beautiful country. Well, we're seeing the fruits of that beautiful country in terms of Trezanne's white Bordeaux style blend. We're seeing the fruits as well in the kitchen here at Proud Mary. And we're also seeing the beauty of the country when we travel. And that is exactly what we do next. It is off to Tulbagh and the brand new adventure of Wynand Grobler, formerly of Rickety Bridge, now in partnership with Faf du Plessis and Free du Pré, amongst others. A huge property out in the mountains of Tulbagh that's set for some very exciting times. Part of this year's Dan's Epic Wineries has brought me to Tulbagh, and I thought I knew everybody who made wine in Tulbagh, having visited all of them. And then yesterday, while we were at Sarensburg, I got a message from Andy Woolgar at Elephant Corner Vineyards over in the States, who distributes so much great South African wine through the Carolinas, to say, have you seen Wynand? He's moved to Tulbagh. Wynand being the genius, along with Faf du Plessis, behind the Kleine Wijn Corp. And then Wynand himself sent me a message, say, hey, are you coming to visit? I'm now living in Tulbagh. And I'm very glad I got that message, because as you can see from the surrounds, this is a beautiful, beautiful corner of what is already a very eye-catching valley. But what is particularly cool is I didn't even know this place existed, and it turns out it's an iconic South African vineyard full of history and with a legacy of winemakers here that include people like Andrea Molyneux and Eben Sadi and Tremaine Smith most and so many of the modern greats of South African wine. And so appropriately, it's another up-and-coming great of South African wine who now has stewardship of this extraordinary place. Wijn, it's still finding your feet a little, but welcome to Tulbagh.
Big time. Thanks, Dan. It's great to have you guys here. It's always good to welcome you and to hear how lyrical you get over the wine industry. So it's good to have you.
Well, it's not hard to get lyrical, to get passionate, to get excited about the wine industry, because not only do we make such good wine, and you're one of the many people who does exactly that, but there is so much excitement to an industry that is in this constant state of flux, and that applies to you now. You've said goodbye to your previous space and now set up in a slightly remote but very, very beautiful place.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of those areas where, like, there's so much potential here that's still to be, discovered. And I mean, these vineyards were planted in 2000, and they are absolutely great. Like, and some great potential it's got great potential, and some great wines have already come from them through these guys that you mentioned, Katlego and the Molyneux and everything. So we know we're in the right spot, and there are plenty of others here around here, and we can't wait to see where else it goes.
This is the newest chapter of what's been a really fun story for you over the last few years. I think we first crossed paths at Annie Else and then onto Rickety Bridge, and then came this opportunity to join this slightly weird creative collective of people who either could make wine or thought they could make wine and wanted to do something fun. And in a very short space of time, that became the monster that is the Kleine Wijn.
Yeah, Dan, I think we're lucky to have had some great people involved in the past, and some great vineyards also backing it. So it's easy in South Africa when you have access to these great old vineyards and, good winemakers. I think we all help each other and stuff. So it's a great symbiotic relationship between all of us and the great vineyards that we have access to. So yes, it's actually quite easy. Can never say something like that in the wine industry, but it's quite easy to make something, from everything that we have access to.
Give me the snapshot history where you were asked to come and make some wine. You and your wife ended up buying the brand. There was an annoyingly good-looking cricketer with a penchant for overly tight clothing who joined you, and you've now moved on to, I believe, a rugby superstar involved as well.
Yes, exactly. So we were lucky to have Faf and AB obviously backing us in the beginning. We had this great idea to start, wine brand and wine brands. We had access to, to get involved with the Kleine Wijn. We obviously bought in all the brands and started making these great vineyards. And then, a year ago or so, another famous sporting star, some of you might know him as Fourie de Pre. He actually approached us and we approached them. I don't know exactly, it was over a couple of glasses of wine. So I don't know who was brave enough. And we got together and we started discussing the possibility of us actually ending up here and doing something with them. So I think we've got the right backing. We've got great guys. Both of them, the only fall down, I don't know how you say, to this relationship is both of them were uffies. So I'm not sure how I feel about that.
We can't have everything.
You can't have everything. But yeah, so we have some good partners and great guys, all in all, backing us here.
And you've also got a remarkable space. I've yet to meet a winemaker who doesn't proudly show off her or his cellar, but you were skipping through it, and rightly so, because it is an extraordinary setup.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the iconic cellars. It's one of the first gravity-fed cellars in South Africa. So for us, it's just, for me, it's a dream to work here. My harvest team also loved it. It's a lot easier than our previous setups. So everything's gravity-fed, as I said. It basically does the work for you. But yeah, I think the quality that's going to come out of the cellar is great, and it's super exciting.
You've also got vineyards that are roughly the size of Malawi. You've got, I think, the potential to have 280 odd tons of grapes. That doesn't seem to chime with what I know of what you've done so far, where it's always been smaller and more bespoke. How do you balance those two up? What's the journey forward? So
our growth will always be organic. I mean, we have, we make wines from great vineyards, and some of those vineyards can be, some of those vineyards we have access to more of the grapes, like over here where we have the potential to do 220 tons. We're definitely not going to skip into making everything under the brands. We'll grow it properly, in the right way.
It's the challenge, both the opportunity and the problem that so many winemakers have when you get to a certain size. Is right, well, there's lots of stuff we can do. What should we decide that we will do? Because often there's so much you can do really well, but only so much you can do that'll allow you to get the best out of that product.
Sure, I agree. And then, but the other nice thing about it, I was just thinking about it, we do have the opportunity for some other guys to buy some grapes here, you know. So.
All right, let's try some wine. I think the first wine I remember falling in love with was the Kleine, and we'll try that in a second. But kicking off, this is one that I've served to a number of people over the years, and we're still, I feel, as South Africa, in this transition phase of understanding what modern rosé can be in South Africa. The Barbie pink days of day-glow diabetes in the glass are largely behind us, thankfully, and instead it's wine that's more elegant and more savoury and throws towards the kind of south of France wine that rosé, I think, at its best should be. And there are a number of people, yourself included, who've been able to bring the very best out of rosé and introduce it to people in a way that I think quite often takes them by surprise.
No, exactly, Dan. So when we just got married, myself and Anya, we spent a lot of time in the south of France, and we wanted to make something that, you know, South African, but with the quality of, you know, proper Provençal rosé, something that's barrel fermented, not as sweet, you know, has a little bit of savouriness to it, proper varietals, grown properly on the correct soils. So we went for something that's slightly more sandy soils or alluvial soils, lots of decomposed sandstone as well. And just, you know, barrel fermented Grenache Noir component of it. So it's a Syrah Mourvèdre Grenache blend. And that just takes that edge off that sweetness and gives you that little bit of more serious sort of rosé where there's depth, there's character. Also, all our wines are unfined. So the tannin and the texture you get is from the whole bunch pressing. We foot stomp it, basket press it, barrel fermented, then other components stainless steel, and then blend after a couple of months. So that's why you get these. And I think South Africa as an industry is great because we've really embraced that, I think, in the last 6 or 7 years, where suddenly you have a shelf in, for instance, a Pick n Pay or Norman Goodfellows or wherever with a bunch of decent products actually lining the shelves, not just sweet and, as you said, so sweet and bright neon. So I think the industry is moving towards a point. It's great for South Africa. We've got so much potential, as I said, throughout our regions. So it's good.
All right, so off to a winner with the rosé, onto the wine that I have already mentioned. And for me, this embodies not just the winemaking philosophy, but also the whole look and feel of what you do. There's always been this element of fun and this element of difference. And the Kleine, which generally looks like it was a group of you using mushrooms that are not entirely legal at 3 in the morning and came up with this idea. Because as we look at the bottle, this is something that sort of my kids would draw together, or some weird cartoon, the Kleine. And not only is this one really cool, but every year is cool because that's what you do. With each vintage, there is a new animal that adorns this particular label.
Kleine is one of those brands that it's my favorite one to make in the cellar. We have access to these great vineyards, as I mentioned. So every year I make a blend on literally what's the nicest one in the cellar, and that is the Kleine, you know, like the blend in the end. And that's also why the different animals, you know, it's all these different animals coming together in the cellar, you know, combines to make this like really cool, hopefully cool looking, like, and great tasting wine. So.
The Nagrivexandri, I think.
Yeah, exactly. No, well said. I can use you for our marketing campaigns. I struggle to pronounce it every now and then. Yeah, so it's a blend of Grenache Blanc, Grenache Gris, Videlio, and a little bit of Muscat Alexandrie actually this year. So the blend varies every year. We have these old vineyards, and the Muscat Alexandrie is actually planted in 1971. So nice old vine in the Limmitberg, and the rest is from the Paardeberg actually, so Swartland, proper mineral-driven wines, you know, pick nice and early, get it in a whole bunch, press it, natural ferments in barrel, and then we blend to make this wine that's nice and fresh and has all these layers and components, you know, to it that actually just adds to this wine.
You've got a visual point of difference, obviously, with the label, but also with what is in this particular year. If we look at a South African white blend, the major one we'll find at the moment, the one standing out is a Chenin-led blend. Okay. And here you've got, I think it's a touch under 50% of the Grenache Blanc, and then you're throwing in these grapes. And for many people, they're not that familiar with them. So you've got something that is just at a fundamental level so different as a wine.
Yeah, so I was a little bit geeky in making the wine, where I really sort of broke it down into sections where I wanted certain components to bring something to the blend. Obviously it didn't work out that way. You know, you're making the stuff and in the cellar and tasting and blending, and it turns out that everything does add something, you know, maybe not the way that I thought it would, but it's important, I think. And we, again, in South Africa, you know, we're allowed to blend and get all these wines from different regions, you know, these grapes, and make something like this where it's not maybe traditional or traditional South African, you know, a lot of Shen. And also we wanted to steer clear that we are, you know, we like the small different vineyards all over the show that actually are well suited to the South African terroir.
But also, as we sample it very happily,
Yeah.
not just doing something different for the sake of doing something different, but still having as your guiding light, we're going to make wine that tastes really good. And that has to be the way you do it.
No, exactly, and that's why we pick these vineyards on the soil types. We look where they were planted, you know, how they're being grown, by whom they're being grown. This is 90% of this blend is actually grown and farmed by a farmer called Willie Mostert. So in the Paardeberg, he's brilliant. I think he was named Tim Atkins Viticulture of the Year last year. So he knows what he's doing. I fall in, I look at the grapes, I say dankie oom, and I carry on. And the wines that come from these regions and these grapes are just awesome, man.
All right, to one final wine. This has been a little tricky because you're turning into the new Peter Volser. I think there are, 27 wines you're making at the moment?
Roughly. Like we're getting there, we're trying.
And what makes them really stand out is, again, not just making wine for the sake of making it, but you're finding these really cool vineyards, these old parcels of wine, and that's what drove a lot of the business at the very start, was this expression of places that give you something really unique and offer you as a winemaker the chance to latch onto some really creative material.
Exactly. So as I mentioned earlier, also the wine industry is great. Like, everybody helps each other. So if I'm looking for a great vineyard and maybe looking for something different for next year, I just chat to one of my mates or a bunch of my mates, and they say, oh, they've got a little bit available. And as it happened with this vineyard, so this is from quite a famous little spot in Riebeek Berg, so Riebeek Kasteel, where there are these great schist soils again. So a lot of people get their Shiraz from there. You know, some of the most famous Shiraz vineyards in South Africa is there. And then this little block of Grenache Blanc that I share with a couple of winemakers. It's just one of those iconic vineyards where it's sort of, it gives a character that you don't find anywhere else. And it gives you this great focus on the palate again. It's grapes that you sort of, every year when they come in, you're just glad that you have the opportunity to work with these. I mean, it makes your year as a winemaker.
Before we address the issue of the escaped convict in 1950s US postal worker gear on the label, Grenache Blanc, we mentioned with the blend before this, a lot of grapes that people might not be familiar with. What for you as a winemaker gives Grenache Blanc something special? And for somebody who's watching, I've never had a Grenache Blanc before, why should you be going out to find some?
So Grenache Blanc can be a very aromatic varietal, and I think the main aim or the goal as a winemaker for me is to sort of tone that down. And it's very well suited to our climate. It's grown elsewhere in the world in sort of very similar conditions. So when they planted it here, 25 years ago, they knew it was going to work. But I think winemakers just had to find out how to make it exactly so it works perfectly for us in South Africa. And that's what we've sort of been figuring out, a bunch of us. And I think the guys are really hitting it on the spot, where you have an element of that freshness that you want. So ageability, very nice, freshest, natural acidity, with that richness that you can get from a Grenache Blanc. And the balance between that is key, I think. And that's also what great vineyards give you, is you get that sort of natural balance, and you don't have to alter it in the cellar or try and make it. As a winemaker, it makes itself. I mean, it's the old saying of wines are made in the vineyard. And these grapes just, it's the epitome of that.
Yeah, there is no greater attribute to a wine than balance, and you've got it again here. They are made in the vineyard. They are sold outside of the vineyard. In this case, if you happen to be in the Carolinas, by a guy, we actually did the stats on this. We've done over 1,000 episodes of Dan Really Likes Wine. A guy called Andy Woolger's watched over 2,000 episodes. So they're actually episodes I've never been in that he has watched. And he's just this incredibly passionate Englishman in America who's fallen in love with a range of South African wines, yours in particular. And this is a really cool tribute to somebody who's one of those many quietly unsung champions of South African wine around the world.
Yeah, I mean, Andy's an amazingly talented salesman, and that's all I can say about him. No, what a guy. And I mean, we've been working together for years since the start. We were the first winery to actually import it. I don't know if you know that, Dan.
I didn't.
But yeah, so there's a big love-hate relationship between us. Old Andy, what a man. And we decided to name this wine after him. Like it's a standing joke between me and him where I said, you know, Andy, you like the postman because he always delivers. I mean, Andy does everything from he gets the order, he delivers the wine, he does everything, and he does it by the container load. So Andy, and this vineyard was, you know, producing consistently, like, you know, the goods. So I thought, you know, one day standing in the vineyards and, like, you know, just before harvest, and I thought, yes, this vineyard always produces these great, like, fruit and results. And I thought, I'll name the wine the Postman, the Postman.
Like, it's a terrific tribute, and Andy, I know you'll be watching this. Thank you for all of your support and everything you do for a brand that now sits at a really important juncture.
Then I must add, we did do a very flattering sketch of him.
You did.
You know, it's not,
it's kind of a teenage Andy reimagined as part of the cast of Prison Break. I think that's how it's come through. Andy taking your wine to America through the partnership with Faf du Plessis wine, going in his cricket bags around the world, and Alfred Dupré also introducing you to his network. But for all of that, it's still the wine itself that ultimately has to catch people's attention, and it has done that for some time now. With all of this excitement, with this horizon opening up, what comes next for the brand?
Yeah, I think we're in a very lucky position to be able to experiment and do different labels and brands all the time. So we've got a bunch of things fermenting in the cellar, very interesting vineyards that we get to pick and choose from. So there's always, you know, renewal and growth and expansion for us. So yeah, and especially with the farm and I don't want to say farm because this is more like a
small country.
Exactly. Yeah, but yeah. So there's so much opportunity for us. So I can't wait to see what's in the future.
There are also guest cottages on the way. The moment they're open, I shall be back with my team to come and annoy you again, drink some more great wine, and celebrate this wonderful story of yours.
Eat in our restaurant, have a great meal, sit down, stay over. Can't wait, Dan.
Perfect. All we need is that new Norman Goodfellows in Tulbagh, and we are all good to go. It's a little off the beaten track, but it's a glorious, glorious part of the winemaking world. And now under the tutelage of Kleine Wijn and his team, with some pretty cool backers behind them, expect the Kleine Wijn Co-op to just keep on getting better. Cheers. Tulbagh's had some lovely wine stories to tell over the years. People like Krona and Sarensberg and Rakes. I think this new edition, Tulbagh Mountain Vineyards, picking up on a tradition of winemaking, but adding the flair of Wijn en Grobbelen, bringing in the Kleine Wijn Co-op angle, and taking advantage of 280 hectares of fruit. Means there's a lot to come from what is not just a beautiful stretch of the wine world, but also one that's in the hands of some really passionate people. So a big thank you to Wijn, a big thank you to the Knysna Oyster Company, to Pete Goffe-Wood, to Grendel for a lovely, lovely lunch that went on a little longer than planned down in Cape Town. And thanks to Kat and the team at Proud Mary. She's such a wonderful sommelier with a real gift for wine and the food that goes along with it. And Sarah and the Proud Mary team, thank you for having us. It won't be too long before you see us again. As will be the case with the show, we'll see you back again, premiering every Thursday. It's Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Goodbye.